So that's the title of my message for this morning, Another Temple. And I'm going to read few verses which has some reference to the temple. So I want you to follow the verses that we're going to quickly read. There are a number of verses that I want to pick up from the Gospel of Mark. I just want you to follow with me as we read these verses. All these verses have some reference to the temple. All right, let's read Mark 11 verse 11. Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Right? So he's gone into the temple so many number of times. He has seen what was going on. Right from his childhood days, temple was a very familiar place. But it's very interesting. It says he looked around at everything. So that tells me Jesus, that day when he was in the temple, he was very observant. He was watching carefully, right? And I think he was also deeply thoughtful. There was something that he wants to do, but he didn't do it. Very interesting. It says, since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Right? Let's move on to the next verse. Mark 11 verse 15. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And we know what happened after that. I don't have to read it. And he chases all of them out, and he says, it's written, my house is called the house of prayer, and you have made it a den of thieves. Right? So the previous evening he came and he was observing all of that, but he didn't do anything because the Bible records that it was very late, and comes back the next day and he does something very dramatic. He has not done this before. He's been in that temple so many number of times, and here he does something very dramatic, and he chases all of them and screams at them saying, my house is a house of prayer. Let's move on. Mark 11 verse 35. While Jesus was teaching in the temple courts, he asked. Almost every other day he was in the temple. So you find a lot of temple sermons. So he was talking more, and in every sermon, temple was in some way or the other the focus of his message. He was talking to the religious, Pharisees and all those religious Jews who were there in Jerusalem. So you can understand every day he was there at the temple. Let's move on. Mark chapter 13, verse 14. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. So he's talking again what will happen in the last days, how the Antichrist. So that's a reference to the Antichrist will come in the temple, desecrate, dishonor, the temple, right? So that's what he's trying to say. All right, Mark 13 verse 1. Now listen to this carefully. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to them, look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings? Replied Jesus. Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. That would have unsettled the nerves, ruffled up certain feathers. That's not something which the Pharisees and the religious people want to hear. Finally, one more important verse, and that's the focus of my message. All right, Mark chapter 4, verse 58. We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another not made by man. He said, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days I will build another not made by man. When we actually read the Gospels, if you carefully read the flow of the Gospels, you will discover something, that there is a big shift that's happening in the ministry of Jesus. Right? So the initial stages of his life, when he started his ministry, you will see the first few years, the 3 years of his life, most of his ministry was done in the upper north, Galilee. Right? That's where most of his ministry, most of his time was spent there. That's his favorite region, right? right? The Galilee, that's where he was. Capernaum was this town. Even today, if you go to Israel, right at the entrance of that city, it says the town of Jesus. Right? That's where he was. And most of the miracles that he did, a number of miracles that you see in the Gospels happen in those region, right? It's called as the evangelical triangle, Bethsaida, Chorazin, and Capernaum. Why does it call as the evangelical triangle? Mostly Jesus was there preaching to thousands and thousands of people. That's where you find a huge crowd coming and people were getting healed, 5,000 being fed and all of that, right? So that was his place, and most of this ministry, the 3/4 of his ministry was done there. And even some of those instances where he had to come down all the way from Galilee, from Capernaum, he comes and visits Jerusalem. If you have noticed when you read the Gospels, in those instances when he came, and hardly he has done one miracle there, right? Hardly he would do a miracle. There's a guy who's there in the pool of Bethesda, and he heals him, and there's a big uproar. There's a big uproar, right? And he heals them on a Sabbath, and there's a people who are coming and questioning him, and there's an altercation that happens, and how can you do this on a Sabbath? And sometimes they try to stone him, harass him, and then after one miracle, he just sneaks away, goes back to Galilee, right? That's how his ministry style was most of the time, 3/4 of his ministry. But you read the Gospels towards the end of his life, few months, you will find most of the time he was in Jerusalem in the temple. He was constantly preaching to them. There's a big shift that's happening in the ministry of Jesus. The focus of his ministry changes towards the temple. Right? It just happens during the last days. That's why every day you find him in the temple. Sometimes God just does that shift, right? Even when we started our ministry, when I started my ministry, all that I knew about ministry was just, you just have to preach. And I was very passionate about preaching, and I wanted to be a Bible teacher. So I thought ministry is all about preaching God's word, and teaching God's word. And then I dreamed of traveling to so many different places, so many different pulpits, in so many different countries, and, preach God's word. And that was all that I knew about ministry. But at some point of time, God just shifted. There was a transition in the ministry. We never thought we would be involved in missions. Not in my wildest dreams, I thought missions would be there in the calling. That's not what I probably thought of. And then something happened. We went to a mission trip in 2000, way back in 2004 in Bengal, and then the transition happened. And today we do so much of missions, right? There's something that God does in your life that sort of shift. So there is a radical, significant paradigm shift in Jesus' ministry, and where he is every day in the temple, and it's making the Pharisees uncomfortable. His comments are becoming contentious, and they are very angry because he has chased the money changers from the temple. What is he doing? Who has given him the authority to do all of this? He's screaming at them, this is my God's house, and all this is going on, and he's not leaving. Now people are plotting to kill him, but he's not leaving. He's coming back the next day, and he's still preaching to them. And then he makes the most controversial statement, and he says, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days another. Right? That's what we heard. That's what the people are saying. It's implied. That's what they said. They said, we heard him say, and it was true. Of course, what Jesus was talking here is about his body, but there's more to it. He's saying, I'm going to destroy this man-made temple, and I'm going to build another temple. Though he was talking about his body, but there was something more spiritual, profound, where Jesus was implying when he was saying this. He's saying, I'm going to build another temple, right? And imagine how the people would have thought. They didn't understand this. I believe it's just not the ministry that has shifted. God's very purpose for mankind is shifting. God is just saying, I'm not going to live in man-made temples anymore. God's very purpose is shifting here. God is making a very powerful statement here where He's saying the focus of God is shifting from a physical temple to a spiritual temple. God is not going to be interested living in the external man-made structures. He wants to live in you and me. He wants to inhabit your lives. He wants to possess you. He wants to be part of you. You are going to be the new temple. That's what Jesus is saying. But they couldn't understand. They didn't get it when Jesus was saying all of that. Right? He will destroy this man-made temple. Man, they got very upset. They got very angry with Him. They said, this temple, that's what they refer to. This temple was built. 40 years we built this temple. This was a mark of glory. I mean, the temple was associated with Jewish heritage. They believed that this is the place that God dwelt. When Solomon prayed, the Shekinah glory came down. People saw that this was a place that God's dwelling place. God lived there. Right? The Temple Mount is the place where Abraham offered his son Isaac. They have a history. It's God's place, and it's an offense to say that He's going to destroy this temple. They were so offended. They were so angry. It's not a pagan temple. It's the hallmark of our faith. How can this man say that? It's an unpardonable sin. But let's say, even the disciples could not handle this. Even the disciples were not able to handle this. Let's go to this passage, okay? This is the transition. Let's go to this passage. We're going to read from Mark chapter 12 verses from 41, and then we will continue reading chapter 13 verses 1, which we read in the series of verses. All right, I'm going to give you a picture of what's going on here and what is Jesus trying to convey. All right, Mark chapter 11 verse 41. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Again, sitting in the temple treasury. He's watching the temple treasury, right? The money that's coming in. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 mites, very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Now, calling His disciples to Him, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. Now see the connection here. Chapter 13 verse 1, we just read that. As He was leaving the temple, one of His disciples said to Him, Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Jesus responds, Do you see all these great buildings? Replied Jesus. Not one stone will be left on the other. You see, He's now sitting right in front. Jesus is constantly watching the temple, right? Constantly observing what's going on. And He's looking and He's sitting in front of the temple treasury where people are coming and putting their offerings. And He's saying, look at this. Look at the poor widow. She just gave 2 mites. And look at all the rich men who are coming and throwing in their wealth into the temple treasury. But I'll tell you, what she gave is much more than what they gave. Now, look at what the disciples respond. Did you get the storyline? As they are leaving, the disciples saying, Jesus, look at this temple. What massive stones. What magnificent structures. You know what are they trying to imply? You know what they're trying to tell Jesus? Jesus, well, we appreciate the poor widow who gave these 2 mites, but can't you see this temple was not built with these 2 mites? The smallest, lowest denomination of the Jewish copper coins. If people had only given 2 mites to this temple, we wouldn't see this magnificent structure. We wouldn't see this massive stuff. It's all come because of the temple taxes that rich people paid. This beautiful infrastructure has come because of the people, wealthy people who have given their money. Right? It makes sense, right? What he's saying, when I started ministry, I used to do most of the work. Now we have a lot of wonderful volunteers, servants, Christ-like servants doing so many work for us, which eases your job. But during those days, I used to do most of the work. I used to come on a Monday morning and I used to count the tithes and offerings. I used to sometimes sweep the church, everything I used to do. So we had these covers for tithes and offerings those days. So anybody wants to put their tithe, we have a cover and you write it and put it in the offering box. So we had a family who started coming to our church, and the man, he was a businessman. So he came from a traditional church. He was very reluctant because of his children has started coming. He had no choice. But he also started coming. He started liking the church. And we used to, nice person, I used to have a lot of conversation with him. And one day he told me, Pastor, I came to Chennai with nothing. He said, I came to Chennai with nothing. And I started a small business and God blessed me thousandfold. This is what he said. So no exaggeration, Pastor. God blessed me thousandfold. He set up so many businesses all over the city, right? And I'm so blessed. So, and he started also giving his tithes and offerings to the church, and I'll be the one on Monday morning trying to take all those covers, tithes, and we had a ledger, write it down. So he consistently gave his tithes, almost very faithful, month after month. It'll be in the cover and it'll be 100 rupees. That's what the businessman gave, right? And we faithfully accounted it in our and thank goodness we had a lot of other, generous people who gave more. So we were able to run the church. Just think about it. I'm just thinking, just practical side of it. If all of you decide from next month, we will give the lowest, smallest denomination, to the church, because anyway, God is not bothered about, how much you're giving. We are almost paying 1 lakh, right, for this place. What do you think would happen? Right? I think I would go in for a fast. God will still provide. I would not ask you. We have not done that. But I think I have to ask Pastor Samuel, all of us, let's just fast and pray. There's no money coming in. Practically, would we be able to run the church? No. Right? That's what the disciples are saying. Well, we appreciate the widow, 2 mites. But Jesus, look at these massive buildings. Look at these beautiful stones. It doesn't come because of 2 mites. It's because of the wealthy people who have come and who have given for the temple. That's why it looks so beautiful. Can't you see it? And Jesus said, is it? I'll tell you. This temple will crumble without a stone upon the other. There'll be nothing here in this place. They were shocked. They were shocked. What was Jesus trying to tell them? Jesus is saying, God's focus has shifted. That's what he's trying to say. God's focus has shifted from a physical temple to a spiritual temple. God is not interested in the physical structures, the externals, these religious rituals. God is not interested in the piety of people. We have not come there yet. God is not interested in the piety of the people. God is not interested in your coming. And there was so much offerings going on. There's so much of worship going on. There were so many people there. And here is a temple who stood the stands of time, 1,000 years, approximately 990 years. God is saying, I'm not interested in all that anymore. I'm looking for people. I'm looking for people who will carry my presence. God is saying, it's shifting. It's changing. The focus of God, yes, has shifted from a physical temple to a spiritual temple. God is not interested in the steeple or the sacraments or our special events. He is looking for people who will be carriers of God's presence. God is not interested in all the external things that we are doing for Him, right? I've written, He's not interested in the steeple. The churches in those days had these steeple. You know what a steeple is? This long tower, pointing tower to the sky, and you will cross on top of it. And people building churches, even, The old churches have, the Scottish church Kirk in Egmore here, it has a big steeple, right? So they started building churches with steeples, and taller the steeple, the greater the prominence, and they had a lot of money, they could build a higher, steeple, and the church was so prominent in the city. That's the way people started building, right? We spend a lot of money, on all of that. God is saying, I'm not actually interested in all of that. I think this is all will crumble. That's what he's saying. Years back, I was there in US, and we were traveling and crossing a church campus. In abroad, the church campus is so huge. There's so many facilities, and right at the entrance, you still have the church board. And I saw a church which has the highest steeple you can imagine. And then on top of that, usually it should be a cross, right? It was a crescent. And I was just, what happened? Which is so strange. I've never seen a church like that with the steeple on top of it. There's no cross, there's a crescent. He said, this property is taken over by the Muslims. It's no longer Christians. God is moving on, right? That's what God is saying. Every time when he came into the temple, that's what Jesus was trying to convey to them. He's trying to say, the time has come that God is moving on. He's moving on out of your religiosity. He doesn't want your religion anymore. He's not interested in your sacrifice. He's not interested in your songs. He is not interested in your piety. He's not interested in your ritual. God is seeking out for people who really have a heart to worship him, who really be carriers of God's presence. Today in Bengal, the church cannot gather. You've been gathering in that same place for the last 10 years. We can't gather anymore because the last week there was a mob that came and stopped us and said we can't gather in our church premise anymore. So the landlord said he doesn't want to stick his neck out. He said, you're a nice guy, but I can't handle this. At the old age, I don't want to go into the court or just leave the place. Right? So all those church people, close to 150 of us, in Bengal today, we have all distributed them into different worship places in different villages. People, they are the ones, the first generation Christians who have given their lives for God and ostracized by their community. They don't have a freedom to worship, in a hall like that, But in the midst of all that persecution and the threats, they are still worshiping God in their house churches. Yesterday, Jose called me and said, even after moving on to those houses, there's still threats coming to us that, they're saying that we still shouldn't meet there, but we are still going to go ahead and worship God. You see, that's the real church. People who will worship God, even if your life is put on the line. God is saying, I'm not interested in your religion. That's the problem here, the church. He's saying, I'm not interested in your sacraments. Sacraments is what? The songs that we sing, the Sunday after Sunday that we come and worship God, the offering tithes that we give, right? And the communion that we partake in, it's all become just a ritual. And of course, our special events, programs. I don't know, today the craze is all about, you have to keep telling the people something special is coming, to keep them excited, anticipated, right? We also do that. I'm not saying you don't do that. It's all become part of this, this culture, the church culture. There's something exciting is happening. We have to make people feel like there's some program that's coming up which no church has ever done it. And we are the ones, the bee's knees, the ones so unique. Trying to, it's like, I'm not interested in all of that. Not interested in all of that. We have spent a lot of money on this church. Do you know that? We've spent a lot of money. Your eyes will pop out if I have to say that. Why do we do that? We want people, everyone walks into the church, it's so beautiful. The church is so nice. The ambience feels so good. People choose their church based on the ambience. Do you know that? It's spend so much of money. We spent so much of money on this, right? Hindus are, even the BJP government is spending a lot of money on temples. I think the Ram Mandir budget was 2,000 crores. 2,000 crores. We spent so much of money. Oh, we are building our churches. We are spending a lot of money. I'm not talking about any big church or small church. It's not the question about the size. If you all leave this place, tomorrow this will become a warehouse. If you all leave this place, God is not coming here because we have set up some beautiful lights and there is a beautiful ambience here. We have God is not coming here because of that. He's coming here because of you. I will be enthroned in the praises of my people. He says, when my people come and they worship me truly with all their hearts, I will come and I will set up my throne here. Jesus said, you worship me with your lips, but your hearts are far away from me. That's what he said when you walked into the temple. You all come and you worship me, but you worship me so beautifully with your lips, but your hearts are 1,000 miles away from me. You can do that, right? When you come to church, you can worship God. You can sing those songs, but your heart is somewhere else. It doesn't even come closer. So God is not interested in all of the external things. That's what he's saying. God's focus is shifting. He's shifting from the religious external factors to the hearts of men and women who will really seek him with all their hearts. And he's been saying that all the while, right? Remember the conversation with the Samaritan woman, Jesus? He was having a beautiful conversation. And she said, well, Jesus, looks like you're a prophet, but I'll tell you where we worship. We worship in this mountain. And you Jews, you worship in Jerusalem in the temple. No, woman, a time is coming. I want to tell you that. No. God doesn't have any favorite places anymore. No favorite peoples, no Jews, no Gentiles, nothing. No special location. He's moving out of that. No, woman, a time is coming that you will neither worship in this mountain nor in that temple. He seeks true worshippers who will worship him in spirit and in truth. God is seeking true worshippers. It's not about where you worship. It's not about which church you're part of. It's not about how you worship him. He's seeking true worshippers who will worship him in spirit and in truth. He walked into this temple on the last day of the feast. The Bible says, you read John chapter 7, the last day of the feast, he walked into the temple. And they were all bringing their pitchers of water, praying for the harvest, praying for the rain, praying for the blessing. All the rituals happening as usual, where the priests are carrying their golden pitchers, water from pool of Solomon, pouring it and praying. You know what Jesus walks and screams at them? If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Out of you shall flow rivers of living. It's you. You are the one. Jesus is turning the focus. It's shifted. It's no longer there in the temple. God is saying, I'm coming to dwell in you. If you give your heart, if you give your life to me, and out of you shall flow. You will be a blessing. This is what he's been. If you actually carefully read through all those sermons that Jesus has been preaching in the temple with the parables and all that he was saying, just telling, I'm not interested in your external religiosity anymore. I'm not interested. I'm interested in your heart. I'm interested in those individuals whose hearts are swallowed up for Jesus. That's what he was saying. So he's saying, I'm building another temple. And who is this temple? Who? You are the temple of God. You are the ones. He's going to tear his life apart. In 3 days' time, I'm going to give my life. And I'm going to build a temple. You are the ones. God's dwelling place. God will live in them. God will walk among them. He will be their God and I will be his people. It's you and me. What was the reason why God rejected Solomon's temple? What was the reason? It's important, right? It's important for us to know why God rejected. Because you know what God told Solomon? My eyes will be there on it. He said, my ears will be open. You turn your face towards Jerusalem. You turn your face towards this temple. You pray, I will hear. And God made a covenant. Why did He change then? He said, I will be always in this temple. Why did He change? What was the problem? What was the issue? Jesus said it. We read it. When He walked into the temple, what did He see? He said, my temple will be called, my house will be called a house of prayer. You have made it into a den of thieves. My house, God's house, is a house of prayer. It's not a house of programs. Right? Even preaching would become a program. Do you know that? Even preaching can become a program if people's hearts are not seeking God in prayer. Everything was a program. Right? He says, my house will be called the house of prayer for the nations. For the whole nation, we've been praying here. We should be praying. God's people must be praying. Or where we don't even have time to pray for ourselves. Where do we pray for the nations? Right? But that's where it starts. You pray for yourself. You pray for your city. You pray for your country. You pray for the nations. This is where you pray, I will move. That's what God is saying. That's the spiritual responsibility on God's people. All right, number one, He says, my house is not a house of prayer. It should be a house of prayer. And then what did He do when He came inside? He chased all the money changers. All those who are selling doves. And then He said, He did not allow them to carry merchandise. There are some things that's not allowed in God's house. There's some things that's not allowed by God's people. He's cleansing. What is He saying? This is He's talking about purity, right? Purity. So people of God, let me say this. Prayer and purity are the bedrock of Christian faith. Prayer and purity. We will not stand or survive the test of time without it. Prayer and purity. That's what Jesus found missing in His house. You can build anything as big as you want, as beautiful as you want, as successful as it may appear. But I want to tell you, it will not stand or survive the test of time if prayer and purity is not the foundation of your life. You can build a great business, you can have a big turnover. Well, great. You can build a wonderful career. You can be a smart guy in the industry, get a good job, right? And make it successful. You can build a beautiful family, have a beautiful wife, you have a wonderful kid. You build a beautiful family. I'll tell you what, if you're not building it, if prayer and purity is not the building block of your life, of your career, whatever it may be, it will crumble. It will not stand the test of time. Prayer and purity. That's what happened here. God couldn't see that here. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, right? The temple was 1,000 years old. Look at the number of priests there. Look at the 23,000 sacrifices a day was offered in the temple. God said, I'm not interested. Can you imagine? During the time of feasts, 20,000 sacrifices offered. And God is saying, it's no longer a place of prayer and purity. When there was a spiritual decline among God's people, the very foundation of Christianity has collapsed. When there was a moral decline among the common people, the very foundation of civilization has collapsed. It's happened in the past. It'll happen in the future. It'll happen again and again. When we bury our Christians' values or compromises, we will fail. That's what happened. So how do you build your life? What's the life of this church? Is this church built on prayer? Is prayer and purity the bedrock of our church? How do you build your life? What's the priority of your life? Is your life built on prayer? Are you seeking God? Is your life built on holiness? No, these are the two most structures, building blocks, foundational blocks of our Christian life. If we don't have it, we lose it all. We lose it all. That's the reason why Jesus is saying, I'm moving out of this place. Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense to me. I know Christian families have crumbled. I know ministries have crumbled. I know servants of God have lost it because they've compromised on prayer and purity. People of God, I urge you, that's so important for our Christian life. When Rome fell, they never thought that Roman Empire, one of the longest standing empires in the world, Rome ruled for 500 years approximately. Rome is called as the eternal city because the Romans believed that Rome is destined to be there forever. When Rome fell, the whole world was shocked. They thought the whole world has come to an end. They thought, the historians wrote that the human civilization is found in the ruins. The world has come to an end. So they were all asking questions. What will happen to us now? What will happen to us? The greatest, most powerful, civilization, the most powerful empire has fallen. What will happen to us? Some of the Christians were even asking, right? Because the history, right? Constantine became the Roman Empire. It was slowly becoming Christian. Why does it happen now? Nobody could answer that question. But there was a man who came up with the most incredible statement. Augustine, you would have heard about him. There's the most famous prayer of Augustine who said, our hearts are restless until we find our rest in him. Right? He wrote that in his book called Confessions. So Augustine was there in his middle age when Rome fell about his years. And this is what he said. He said, it is good. It's good for Rome to fall. It's good that the city of man had fallen, because unless it falls, the city of God will not rise. It's good for the earthly city to fall so that God can establish his heavenly city. And it gave people hope. People believed that, in the midst of all of this, the city of God will stand. God is establishing, building a kingdom, right? The city of God will rule forever. And he's going to come back to establish his kingdom. And everything else that is not built on him, everything else is going to fall apart. Do you know that? Everything else will fall apart. He is building his kingdom. So, let's read 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 16. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 16. It's a beautiful verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 16. What does it say? You should know it by heart. What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of living God. As God has said, I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their people, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. Therefore, now see, this is the promise that God has given us. You are the temple of the living God. God is saying, I will come and live with you. I will walk among you, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. This is the great promise. The great promise. But he says there is a condition there, right? Therefore, come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing. Touch no unclean thing. And I will receive you, and I will be your father to you, and you will be my sons and daughters. Since verse 1 from chapter 7, since we have these promises, dear friends, let us purify ourselves from everything that contaminates body, soul, and spirit, and perfect holiness in the fear of God. And you see, there's purity. There is purity even there. But God is saying, even if I have to come and dwell in you, if I have to walk among you, if I have to be your God and you be my people, come on, let us purify ourselves from every filthiness of the soul and the flesh, and perfect holiness in the fear of God. Purity is so important. Holiness is so important. It's contingent. If God has to come and dwell among us, even in this new temple that is your life, God is saying, I want to come and dwell with you. I want to be part of your life. But purity is what He's seeking. Right? So God's focus has shifted from man-made temples. All this makes no sense to God. Do you know that? Our singing, our worship, my preaching makes no sense. Nothing to God. It doesn't move God's heart if we are not a people of prayer and purity. Do you agree with me? It's just we're just making a show here. It makes no sense. He did that. He said that to this physical temple, and He's saying that again to His people. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, you are the temple, I will come and live with you. That perfect holiness. So God's temple, God's presence has been shifting. You know that, right? So, which is the first temple? Tell me, which is the first temple that God built? Where God met, huh? Nat, just he gave the right answer. I have to tell him, he's smart, I know. Give time for a show off, Nat. All right, so great answer. The thing is, he's also laughing. You understood. Your dad is always like that. All right, so now it's a Jewish idea. Basically, it's not a Christian idea. The Jewish literature, the Jewish rabbis believed, it's there in their, documents, in those, Talmud and all those extra literature that they have written. So their Jewish idea is that the first temple was the Garden of Eden, right? And now most of the Bible scholars are agreeing to it, because Garden of Eden is not just a place like a garden where you have animals walking around. No, it was a sacred space. It was a space that God met with people. God met. It was a meeting place of God, and it was the portals where the heaven and earth met. Right? Why do I say that? Because there is a lot of similarity between the temple and the Garden of Eden. Just one I give you. Where was the garden planted? You have to answer now. Answer. Where was the garden planted? God planted the garden in the eastward of Eden. It's a very critical direction, east. The garden was planted, it had an east entrance, all right? It has an east entrance. So when Adam and Eve have to enter, they have to enter through the east. So it was planted in the east. So one of the specifications of the temple was it should be facing the east, always the east, right? So when Adam and Eve entered through the east, from always, the direction is from east to westward. So when Adam and Eve entered to the garden, through the eastern gate, right? And they went in, and in the middle of the garden, there was this tree of life, right? And then further they moved. That was the sacred space where God met. Sacred space. It's a space, it's a holy place where God met with Adam and Eve, right? So, I'm not going to details of that, all right. So the first temple was the Garden of Eden, and God moved from there, right? The next place you will find where God's presence came was Mount Sinai, right? He said, bring all the people out of Egypt and bring them to Mount Sinai. I will meet with them. I will speak to them. There was a time that it was the holy mountain Horeb where God met Moses face to face. And God said, bring my people and they will all worship me at the foothills of Mount Sinai. That was the place where God's presence dwelt, right? And then it moved. God said, no, Moses, build a tabernacle, a tent. I will come and dwell in the midst of my people. And God's presence, the sacred space, was inside the tent, the Holy of Holies, right? That's where God dwelled. And God moved in all their travels. And the tent moved through the desert from place to place. God moved with His people. Always God was moving, the migrating presence of God. Wherever the ark went, wherever the tent went, God went there. And there came a man called David. And he told himself, I am going to build a permanent resting place for God. And God was moved. Tell me, David. So you read that so beautiful in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Tell me, David, for all the years since I brought my people out of Egypt, I have been moving in tents and no one has ever thought to build a resting place for me. David, you are the first one. You are the first one who could think that you will build a permanent place for me. God was so moved. In fact, he said, I will build a house for you as well. But this is the point. So God rested in that temple for how many years? 1,000 years. 1,000 years since the days of Solomon till the time of Jesus. 1,000 years. And now what God is saying, it's enough. I'm moving house. I'm not going to stay here anymore. My permanent residence is changing. I will destroy this man-made temple and I will build another temple. Build another temple not made by man, which means what? God himself. He's saying, I'm moving my permanent residence. Where? You and me. I'm enough. I'm done. I'm done with this buildings. I want to come and live with my people. And you see? So you become the temple of God. You become the temple of God. You carry his presence. How privileged. You think about it, how privileged you are. Where the God of the heaven and the earth, who once upon a time was confined to that most holy place where nobody could even come near, or even the high priest cannot walk in, where God could not be approached or seen, the God of the heaven and the earth chose to come and dwell with you and me. That you become the temple of God. What a privilege. I will be with you. I will walk among you. I will live with you. And I will be your God. And you will be. What a privilege. What a privilege, people of God. Well, I'll close with this final point. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 5. Let's turn to 1 Peter chapter 2. Let's read this. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. It's an amazing text. Unless you understand, you will not understand the depth of it. What is he saying? He's saying, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by God, rejected by men, chosen by God, you also are like living stones. Did you see? You come to him, the living stone with a capital S, which is Jesus, the living stone with a capital S. And you are also living stones with a small s. Did you see that? Right? Did you see the significance there? As you come to him, the living stone with a capital S, and then you are also living stones with a small s. That's a temple language, purely a temple language. And Jesus is that living stone, lithos, that foundation stone, right? On which you, those small stones, are built into a spiritual house, are built into a temple. You know how Solomon built the old temple? Do you know how he built it? He brought huge stones. Can you go to the next slide? He brought those huge stones, the huge blocks of stones. He brought them into the quarry, and it was cut, it was chiseled, it was shaped, it was dressed. And then he brought it onto the temple. It was perfectly made, tailor-made blocks of stones. That's how the temple looked. Huge stones. Huge stones. Peter was there. Those were massive stones. Peter knew what he was talking. Right? He saw those massive stones when he said, Jesus, look at those. Look at these massive, look at the magnificent structure. When the disciples said, he was seeing this stone, huge stones. So much of money was spent to chisel and cut and bring it. Those blocks of lifeless stones. And he's saying now, those are lifeless. You are those living stones. God has made you a temple. He knows what he's talking about. He's been there in that temple. And he's saying now, you are those living stones. You are. Can you see how special you are? You see how special you are? God has chosen you. God has these are choice stones, living stones. God has chiseled you, shaped you, and some of you are still chiseling you, some of you are still shaping you. He's making you into that perfect stone, dressed perfectly, fit into God's temple. Isn't it so beautiful? That's what he's saying here. You are that special crafted piece of stone just built on Jesus himself. Right? And then what he says, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. You are being built into a spiritual house. Wow. You're built into a spiritual house. As you come to him, you're built into he's building you. He's building you. When you come to him, you don't come to him. It's not just about Matthew chapter 11 verse 28. Come unto me all who are weary and heavy laden. I'll give you rest. You're not coming to him only for rest. As you come to him, he's building you up into a spiritual house. That's what the Bible says. He's building you. Right? We were all in YMCA Allegory for our youth camp. I don't know how many of you noticed. So we stayed, remember the men when we used to go, the first time we stayed in the dormitory, remember the old one, where you come outside, we had this space where we did a barbecue. That's all gone there. It's no longer there. They've built a beautiful building there. It's a newly constructed one, they have dormitories there and there's a hall, right, and that's where we had most of our sessions, all of our sessions we had there. Did somebody notice the entrance of that hall? The entrance were pretty small. I don't know, some of us were discussing. You saw that, you have to bend every time you go in. Ashwin and Jared and I were actually wondering, what is this? So much of space, there's so much of space. They could have actually made it a little higher, right? And we were trying to contemplate, how did they make this mistake? And this is our theory. We're saying, actually they've taken you see the windows on either side, they've taken the measurement of the windows. That's what Jared and I were discussing. Maybe they've taken the window measurement and actually put it over the door, because every time it's a beautiful new building, and they missed out the most important aspect, the entrance. The most important aspect of that building is the entrance. You made it so small. Right? Sometimes we can miss the most important aspect in your Christian life. You're being built into a spirit. What is spiritual about that house? You're being built into a spirit. What was spiritual about the Old Testament temple? What was spiritual about the house? The Holy of Holies. God in it. The place where the ark was there, right? God's glory. That's spiritual about temple. If that's gone, it's useless. Remember, the ark was taken away, said the glory departed, ikhabod. Samuel, the ark is gone. Glory, if that is gone, nothing, makes no sense. What is so spiritual about your life? Tell me what's so spiritual about your life. The presence of God. The presence of God. He's saying, I've shifted. I'm no longer there in these temples. The focus of God has shifted from a physical to a spiritual temple where He comes and dwells in you. Do you carry His presence? All that matters to Him is that, are you carriers of God's presence? The Shekinah glory that once upon a time was there only confined to the Holy of Holies has now come to dwell in you. That's what makes you spiritual, right? That's you are being built into a spiritual house. You build your career, you build your business, it's no use. If you're not built into a spiritual house, you understand? If your life is not being built into a spiritual house, anything else you build will crumble. Because the most spiritual thing about your life is God's presence. All right, let's move on quickly. Right, I'm reading that verse. To be like living stones are being built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood. What is Peter saying here? You are a priest. Man, the priesthood was only assigned to one tribe of people, Levite, only one small group. Peter knows it. What he's saying here, all he's saying is that, man, it's shifted. God's purpose has shifted from a physical temple, spiritual temple. He goes on to say, you are a priest. Say that, I'm a priest. You're not convinced. I'm a priest. You are a priest. Can you believe that? That's what he's saying. He's made you a priest. Some Bible scholars say he was writing at a time where Rome has destroyed the temple. So he was writing at a time in a world where a Jewish temple did not exist. A Jewish physical temple did not exist. It was just broken down. And people are wondering, what has happened? How can God allow His temple to be burnt by the pagan Romans? Don't worry. It's moved a long time back. He moved out of it a long time back. You know who's the temple now? You are the temple. Not that you are the priests of God. You don't wear a special white and white and come. You don't have to. You want, you can do it. Sanjay is wearing a white dress. We don't have any specific, attire to wear, ornaments. No. But you are a priest. That's what they say. You are a priest in your workplace. Your office is your mission field. You are a priest. You are called to serve God. You're serving God. Understand? All right. Let me just finish. All right. So what does the last verse says? Like living stones are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices. Are we offering spiritual sacrifices? We don't offer goats, rams, bulls. We don't offer all of that. What do you offer? What do you offer? Ourselves. You offer yourself to God. You are the sacrifice. You cannot offer anything else that will be acceptable to God. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And this is a spiritual act of worship. Romans 12 verse 1. So bringing all of this together, what do you understand? You understand that you are a living stone. You are a spiritual house. You are a priest. And you are the sacrifice. Everything about the temple is in you. And you are the temple of God. You are the temple of God. You are the living stone. You are the spiritual house. You are a priest. And you are the sacrifice. And yes, indeed, He is not interested in the man-made temples anymore. The temple that He has built, where He can dwell. People of God. People of God. What a privilege. What a privilege that you and I are God's living temple. You carry His presence everywhere you go. Are you being built into a spiritual house? Are you being built into a spiritual house? I don't know what you're building on. Maybe you're successful right now. Maybe you think a lot of time has to be spent because this is the moment you have to work so hard. You don't have time for God. Make no mistake, it won't stand for too long. It won't stand for too long. Prayer and purity are the building blocks of a Christian life, foundation on which God builds your life. And God's presence rules over your life. When He says, I will live in them, I will walk among them, I will be their God, and they will be my people, then you carry His presence. Amen. Let's just close our eyes.